what I want you to know is that one of the intentions behind this festival as well is really to establish good contact with a wide diversity of networks. And that's really what this wheel of synergy allows, because we're really spanning out in all directions, and as we say, fractaling out as much as possible into different networks. And eventually, one of the intentions that we're also working on is to start mapping all of these solutions, and mapping the organizations, and mapping all the mentors and teachers, so that, you know, locally you can get an idea of what are the events, what are the opportunities that I can connect with locally in my environment. And so eventually, the technological platform NewMap that you're going to be hearing more about will really be a portal into you know, a new way of interacting and interrelating with each other, and the information that is going to be readily available. We really want to create one single open database where you can just immediately find the information that you need. So we're working with various different solutions hubs. There are already different solutions platforms that you can find on the solutions page of the United Earth website. And yeah, this is really the idea, is that, you know, all of these solutions that have been accumulating over the years, all the information is there on the internet. You just need to know that it exists, and then need to know where to look. But very often it can be quite a struggle to find the right information that you want. So what we're imagining is a consolidated planetary database for human advancement that is freely accessible and freely kind of integrated and collaboratively created. Just got a note here. Okay. All right. We have some time. I think we have some time. There's a poem that wants to be recited here, and I hope in the meantime we're gonna look to see if we can find Jillian. But presenting Mademoiselle MacArthur from Kamloops, British Columbia.
Thank you very much, Jan. Something happened to me one afternoon that was so special and vivid in my life. I sat down and I wrote a poem about it, and it came so easily that I knew that it was meant to be memorized. So I memorized it. And so this is what happened. One day, as I was sitting by the river, watching the river flow, and the curious behavior of a big black crow. He found a big worm, and he hopped on a rock, as big as an altar had he been of the cloth. He snipped off the head, or was it the tail, to get to the goal he sought was there. His beak was his scalpel as he combed and he probed and he spread what he found about like a fan. In awe we saw his focus and care, and wondered the purpose he labored so there. Isn't a worm a passable dinner? It seemed big enough to fill a crow belly, but it wasn't for dinner, and he carefully continued until his purpose was done. The object he sought, his surgery revealed. I swear it appeared to be a little black pearl. His beak was ajar, so gently he held it, so precious it seemed. What could it have been? Was it a heart, or a pearl yet unknown that only grows deep inside of a worm? After he'd gone, we checked out the rock. There should be some evidence, for sure, so we thought. We found the remains set out as described, the short bit cut off and the long part half slit and then combed wide. We agreed it to be the weirdest darn thing, and we went back to sit back and watch as we'd been. A short conversation about where he'd gone, and the purpose he'd put to the pearl that he'd found. With a smile, we decided a use for the pearl. As she is a crow, what a gift for his girl. Along about then, the time came to be to check once more on the worm body. But other than ichor, a smear and no more remained from the surgery performed there before. Instead of for dinner, that worm became twice what he was, as none remained. No oyster lives through the search for a pearl. No murder was done for this black one. A wonder to ponder as the river flows. And that's the poem. And since that time, I've become aware of the benefits that lie inherent in the soil below us, a gift from Mother Earth. A bacteria, perhaps farmed by the worms. Perhaps it become like a kidney stone in a worm, a bacteria that can provide the symptoms, relief from the symptoms of clinical depression with exposure of just 15 minutes. It can relieve symptoms all day.
Yay.
Yay. And there you go, Jan.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Okay. All right. So hopefully Jillian's going to be coming online soon. Yeah, like I said, a little bit of the change of program at the last minute, moving from Maestro, is taking its toll, but that's good. That's fine. Let me see. Any ideas, Brett? No. Anybody want to share anything, discuss anything, share any inspiration? Everybody's camera shy here. That's fine. I'll be here on my own. Oh, yes. What I want to do is today happens to be my birthday. And this is actually the first day, the first birthday since my daughters have been born that I haven't been with them. And it's really, it's not an easy experience for either of us or all three of us. So I just want to tell them how much I love you, Amio and Shea, and just, I know you understand, and happy for me to be doing the work that I'm doing, but it's not easy to be apart from you. So I just want to send you lots of love, and hope to see you here soon in Rotterdam, where we're going to be having the convergence, the co-creator convergence in a month's time. I'll start to share a little bit about that. Is from the COM21, which happened last December. We decided that we want to have another physical gathering, bringing together lots of amazing geniuses and change makers and elders and innovators into the same physical space. So that's going to be happening here in Rotterdam at the end of April, from the 19th to the 23rd. And that will also be live streamed through the United Earth website. We'll share more information about that. But that's going to be a really exciting event. And from that event, we're going to be planning another event. And these three events are really designed to, or not really designed, it's kind of unfolding, but there's a real opportunity within these upcoming events to really start to gather the movement of movements effectively. And we're also going to be talking later, Anne-Marie Voorhoeven from the Club of Budapest and the Hague Center. She's going to be speaking about evolutionary social architectures and how we can organize ourselves in a very self-organizing manner, and completely distributed and equal and transparent and non-hierarchical, but very allowing us to just organize effectively. What was that Martin Luther King quote again? It's time for those who love peace to organize as effectively as those who love war. And this is where we're at now. This is what we're doing. So I'll take this opportunity to go through more of the program. After Jillian speaks, we're going to be speaking to, here's Jillian, yay! I can see. Hello, Jillian.
Hello, hello. Terribly sorry.
Oh no, I think it was on our side, the stuff, but you're here now and feeling very grateful for that. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Does your video work? How's your back?
It does, but I had understood we weren't doing video.
Yeah, no, that's why we're doing Google Hangouts. So do you have an option to switch it on?
Yes, but I've just been the contortionist trying to jury-rig my computer to work. My mouse stopped working, so I'm actually in my house coat. So I'm not so sure I want that level of intimacy right now. It is early in the morning here.
Yeah, true. Okay, well, we got a nice picture of you, so that's cool. So I'm gonna leave you the floor. And look forward to hearing everything that you have to share and what you do and what you're passionate about.
Okay, great. And feel free. I had understood last we spoke that you were going to do ask a few questions, interview style. So feel free. And
cool.
I did manage to hear the first gentleman speak some, but I had to shut down my computer 3 times. I had an error I'd never had before. It's getting a bit funky because it's been on the road pretty hard with me, and I think after its tour of duty in Africa, it feels a little less compliant. Yeah, I think in terms of your beautiful questions, and it's interesting, my assistant reflected to me last night after we had prepared that the questions you asked were pretty much similar to the essencing process that we're in. That's how I've rebranded branding, which is essencing. And it is a question I've been asking myself for a long time, which is, there's a lot of things that I'm quote-unquote good at, but what is it that I'm in the direction of really good at? And what is it that is actually harder for other people to be quote-unquote good at? And moreover, what does the world really need right now? And for me, when I worked with Joanna Macy back in 2000, she had me down on a scholarship and a program in California, which I really appreciated. It was a 2-week program, and there were 2 things that really affected me. And one of them was her calling this the time of the Great Turning, which by now a number of you should be familiar with. The other thing that she said that really cemented that was that she considered it a great privilege to be alive at this time. And when I was home in Quebec, which is relatively rare, at the end of the Mayan calendar, and I was with one of my spiritual teachers, I realized that we were at the beginning of year 1, and I hadn't really gotten that before. Everybody was so focused on the ending, but it's the ending of what? And I was recently in Barcelona, and there was the Catalan separatist movement, which I'm somewhat familiar with, but partly because I grew up in Quebec, which had a very strong separatist movement, which really came of age when I was a child. But it's separate for what? Do we want to recreate the same state that we're already having here? And I think people are beginning to wake up in all walks of life and say, not so much. And we've been talking about sustainable for a long time, and I was appreciative of the concept of sustaining an alive, vibrant, complex ecosystem that was brought up with the previous speaker. But really we're moving more into a regenerative frame. And I have a lot of background, strong background in the biophysical sciences in terms of soil, water, plants, things like that. But because of my work, probably from eco-villages from the beginning when I started teaching permaculture 20 years ago, I saw that normally where the problems in the ecosystems are in the human ecosystems. At permaculture, bless it, it comes more out of a place of, even though it was focused from the beginning on permanent culture, it's really been focused on the earth care aspect. And I don't know if this was brought up, but the 3 ethics of permaculture are earth care, people care, and fair share. And I think we're beginning to mature into more people care, but more looking at equitable, sustainable, or regenerative economies. And my specialty is more in the realm of inviting people into seeing and feeling and really living in the matrix of the whole. And I find that permaculture, while it has a lot of good tools, has traditionally been in the old scientific paradigm of looking at nature as something out there, with me or I really not being recognized as more or less a disembodied observer. And I think that the paradigm shift includes us very much beginning to see the landscape of self and the landscape of the human ecologies, but weaving that all into a matrix of a whole. And for some of us, that also includes spiritual aspects, and even though permaculture traditionally also speaks about the invisible structures, it doesn't necessarily always have space for the spiritual, which is a bit ironic because I think from the beginning, Bill was really appreciative of what he learned from the Aborigines in Australia, but there's a lot of contemporary permaculturalists who really squash anybody wanting to talk about things spiritual. And I think there's a level of discernment there because things can get too woo-woo, but then again, nobody ever seems to complain when things get too rational or heady. So sorry, that was a little less grounded than I had originally intended, but it's been quite a scramble to get to my systems running. I'm thankful that I can see you and you can hear me.
Yay, absolutely, that's working.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of resonance with what you say here, and it's beautiful to bring that angle in. So maybe we can invite you now to have something a little bit more grounded intentionally, to also shed light on that realm.
Well, you know, from when we're young, we learn about people aging, but I think in the lack of intact culture that we have, there's not really a lot of support in understanding the process of aging. And I have my own ego fighting with it, but one of the things that's really been surfacing for me over the past few years is that I have become a middle-aged elder, and I am 51 years old. And there's pain in there, as there often is for many people, because I've been presencing other people in ways that I was never presenced. And as I come more and more into the social aspects of permaculture, in some ways people think that I'm leaving the traditional biophysical aspects behind, but it isn't that for me. It's that when I help to create the space for people to really encounter themselves, the way that they can then see the world around them becomes so much more clear and so much more vivid. And I've been doing a fair amount of mentorship over the past few years, and really my heart's desire is to help to grow much more whole people. And that has to do with health and healing, and I'm sure a number of the other aspects of the wheel journey that you're on is going to be looking at that. But I'd like, if there's one takeaway from today, I'd like people to know and understand, or be invited to know and understand, that permaculture is not just about permanent agriculture. And healthy agricultural systems are highly integral to the human journey. But really what we're looking at and needing is permanent culture. And that doesn't mean just entrenching what's already there and keeping it the same and protecting it at all costs. Indeed, there's a lot that needs and wants to change, and there's a lot that doesn't want to change. But permaculture was developed 35 years ago at a particular point in time where there was a man who was stewarding brilliance, or men, and they brought it to life in a course, in a program that was a 3-week training to get people up and able to do much more in the world. And there's a lot of goodness that's come from that. And if I can risk to say, to some degree, there's still some violence that happens from that, because you can have a lot of people that take up permaculture as a standard and they go charging off, and they don't always do the best or most aligned work, but there's a lot of people who do that outside of permaculture with much, much more damage. So I'd much rather that people were digging swales than sitting on the sofa or raping the planet through their corporation or whatever it is. But I think that there's a place for emotional intelligence and emotional literacy to come in alongside with ecological literacy. And if you're to take a more holistic perspective, that is ecological literacy. Because people like to forget that we are animals and we're part of the ecology of the whole. It's that we've just come so distorted and hold so much power. We've really gotten disconnected from the damage that we've recreated. But even in places like the Mediterranean that used to be forests and have been overgrazed for 2,000 years, there's still life impulse there, which your previous speaker was mentioning, in terms of working in an area that's very arid. That life impulse is almost anywhere. And permaculture is about how can we honor that, create space for that, and allow it to come forth. And yes, we may shape it or guide it, or I like to call it to dance with it, to direct it in ways that meet our needs more sustainably or more regeneratively. We've got a long way to go to get the planet to a place where we'd be running regenerative systems across the board. But I think we're at the point of inflection where historians are going to point their finger at this point in time and say, this is the time when people really started to wake up and make the change. And I think that this is what your initiative is about, is there's so much positive impulse with Paul Hawkins' work that you referenced with Blessed Unrest. There's so many people doing good things, but we still ultimately function in the understanding that we are the minority, and that there's some other that is the majority, some other magical other. And those are old structures of power and authority and control. And it doesn't mean that there isn't any truth to them. But if we want to talk about the power of invisible structures, which we do talk about even in conventional permaculture, that's one of the most powerful. And I really appreciate what you're doing, because I think this is not the beginning, but the early stages of us coming together and say, what does a more holistic, regenerative approach to living, being alive, and being a responsible human being look like? And guess what? It's not an individual sport, which is also part of the old paradigm. It's a collective activity. And our skill set around that is really quite weak, because most of our collective skills are about power and authority and domination over, not power with, and finding joy from within and within each other, and lifting life up and allowing it to grow and thrive. And for me, that's the framework that I teach and practice permaculture from.
Wow, beautiful. Beautifully said. So I'm curious, from a United Earth perspective, this vision of bringing together different groups from so many diverse backgrounds, and we often use the metaphor of the imaginal cells in a butterfly, right? And as the imaginal cells start to form, they start to form clusters. And this is kind of what I'm seeing happening in some cases, but also still very much a latent potential, is that what if we can spark, somehow ignite an intentional unification within each of these clusters? So as we, one of the things that we're working on with United Earth is, okay, we're a platform, a global platform for unity and collaboration and co-creation. And so we are reaching out to other such platforms to start to create a unity, a global unity and collaboration cluster, as it were. Do you do you see any possibility, do you feel any inspiration in helping create like or make visible the permaculture cluster? Do you see any possibility for that? I mean, it's a big question, but I mean, I would also be interested in what you foresee as the challenges and the opportunities in that vision. Obviously, weaving not just bringing permaculture, uniting the permaculture movement for the sake of uniting the permaculture movement, but as part of the process of uniting into the planetary movement of movements, really on the foundation of the ethics.
Well, I think that there's definitely a role that permaculture and permaculturalists can play. I would be, well, it's a complex answer as I start feeling into it, because one of the things I felt the impulse to say is I would be careful about the germ seed and its qualities and characteristics, which, you know, with our element evaluation tool in permaculture, because there is such there's a place where I really want to and do honor the yang drive and impulse, especially of young men that are looking for guidance and support and direction that they want to do, and they want to do constructively and intelligently. And I've been coming more and more to with my Native American history here and lineage, of how the women hold a lot of the space that directs the young male energy. And it may not be always visible, but one of the most beautiful dances that I'm in is with the younger men. And this is ultimately answering your question, in that, because I could say, well, you could just grab any permaculturalist and plug them into your system and say, you know, let's manifest. But a lot of the patterns that have been set in permaculture are about the disembodied, kind of out there doing the physical, the rational, the head, the scientific. And there's a lot of intelligence and even beauty and even grace in that, but even more so when it's held from a more holistic frame. So I would say that to invite permaculture in, I think there's a lot of pieces of the truth, because permaculture, one of its strengths ideally is it sees the whole, especially through the lens of ecology. And I think that there's a way that we can look at human ecologies through the lens of traditional ecologies and see all kinds of opportunity. And I'm not in some ways feeling like I'm answering your question, and part of that is that I don't necessarily know if that's the question that had the strongest resonance with me or if I understood it fully. But there is a question that you had asked me in terms of preparation for this, which is kind of like, what do I need? And I'm paraphrasing it, but that was part of how I heard it. And part of the reason that I remember it that way is I'm not used to looking at things that way. And that's also something that's shifting, because I've just, I'm off the road for the first time in 6 years. I'm quote unquote home in Toronto, which is highly unusual. I haven't been here for Christmas since 2008. And I'm actually more stressed than I've ever been. And everybody always says, oh, you know, how can you handle it on the road? And normally I'm really quite grounded and in a lot of flow. And I've been taking on other people's ecologies here and the city ecology in a much stronger time frame. And I think what I need and want is a system of people around me that can help to lift up the pieces of the truth that I'm stewarding. And right now it looks like things like an assistant that is new for me, somebody doing tech support, setting up a database. I have tens of thousands of images from my travels. I've never even written one blog. And part of it is I came of age, you know, I was 24 before I used my first computer, and I think that young people forget that, you know, voice answering machine was quite the deal when I was about 30. At any rate, I could use support, and I would love to come and spend time with you folks in Rotterdam. I already teach quite a bit around Europe, but you and I, Jan, talked about me potentially coming there. I think one of the highest and best uses for me is to come in and help and invite people into permaculture in a way that makes sense for them, in a way that they can feel that they are permaculturalists just by virtue of being human beings alive on the planet. And a lot of it is giving people permission to feel the hardware and the software, if you can stand that analogy, of being in a human body. And for other people connected to spiritual planes, it's that as well, which is, what is the sacred purpose of being alive? And again, it's not an individual sport, it's a collective. And so I think that there are appropriate ways that permaculture can inform your framework of how you and other organizations like you are going about seeing the quote-unquote problem and finding a pathway forward. And in there, there's finding oneself as an actor. I mean, in permaculture, we say everything gardens, and I was about to say everyone is a gardener, but I didn't want to reinforce the fact that people think permaculture is just about growing and food. But there is also a way that helping people to put their hands in the soil turns on that hardware and software in a way that words and computers may never. So my teaching is very holistic. It's everything from hands in the dirt to deep discussion circles to, lectures and slideshows to whatever. But I think in terms of your imaginal cells, each one of these pods, like what you have in Rotterdam and what you're doing, I think it would be great for them to be informed by and have the imprint of healthy possibility through permaculture.
Oh, yay!
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's such a blessing. I've been saying the same thing, and there's another building that is being made available for the work that we're doing, and really creating this space where we can come together in community, and we are really hoping, I'm particularly hoping, to attract permaculturalists to help design that space and retrofit. I mean, the potential for roof gardens and outdoor gardens is phenomenal in both of these spaces, in fact. So you are very, very welcome to come and play.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And it reminds me of like Ashtanga. I remember when Ashtanga yoga became popular, and I would occasionally go to a class, and I kind of somewhat jokingly began to dub it as a flail festival, because it was too much and too fast for a lot of people. And they would lose their ground and lose their breath and really be in some ways out of body, though they were ostensibly trying to be embodied. So what just came up for me is there's a way that you can do that from kind of a dissociated kind of yang place that's looking for ground, but it isn't really contextualized. And then there's also a lot of people who get marginalized in that process, where they don't see themselves. Permaculture becomes about those other cool people doing cool things that I feel a little bit dissociated from. But I think that there's a way that we can do it all together, where we find our ground and we can dance, and all the other aspects of what you're doing can be woven in and through and around the permaculture, because we can recognize really that it's all permaculture.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before you go, Jillian, yeah, I would like to say to you that yeah, you really inspired me towards permaculture and actually broadened my vision about it. So thank you so much. I mean, your talk really touched me on a deep level, actually, by seeing that permaculture is not just about growing food, but it's really about growing human beings. So thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared. And I mean, I've written like crazy everything that you shared around your vision as well. And I hope we can map that in the technology we play, which is NewMap.
All right.
That we can map also your need, and then see where we can maybe find more creative partners for you as well.
Right. Thank you. Well, maybe.
And the region you're working from.
And I think that this is, you put out a big impulse like this, and there's a lot of weaving that could, would, should happen afterwards. So I look forward, after you get through this major pulse, of picking up this thread and working it with you. I think there's a lot of beautiful things that can come, and other members that would like to join. So I think your next speaker has appeared.
Yeah, it seems a little bit prematurely, and Andrew should be coming in much later from Australia in the communication sector. Unless you've all of a sudden become an expert in midwifery and conscious birthing, Andrew.
No, I'm just trying to figure out how this Google biz works, so I'm prepared for tomorrow.
Great. Well,
you can take me offline, and I look forward to going live tomorrow.
Absolutely, yeah. We look forward to hearing from you too. Have a good night, Andrew.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah, I think our tech guy will hopefully take care of that. See you soon.
Okay. So yeah, I figured we were done at the top of the hour, but maybe you had a bit of a kabobble from your system going offline.
Yeah, a little bit of a delay, but it seems like Curtis, Alina is not. We haven't heard back from Alina. Maybe you can, Tan, could you check with Mona? Mona is kind of helping Alina. Mona? We're the next was going to be Alina, a midwife and doula from Mexico, who's going to speak about conscious birthing and its importance in the new paradigm. So I'm really hoping she makes it online. But as you know, it's an occupational hazard with midwives that they can easily get called away at the last minute at any time. So I would, I'm very happy to continue the conversation with you if you're all right with that. Jillian, your mic is muted now.
Sorry, I had muted it because I needed to click on something. Yes, I'm willing to keep going. I think I'll just grab my cup of tea if we're going to go longer.
Great.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't normally drink tea, but you had me up quite early, so.
We did, yes.
Actually, I just heard from Tan, who is part of the new map team, that she is simultaneously mapping everything that in new map already. So that's great work that she's doing.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, and you know, there are various attempts, I think, that are being made around the world to create collaboration platforms and co-creation platforms. But yeah, I'm really looking forward. I think we're all looking forward to sharing NewMap as a technology that is really inherently designed to take us all out of silos and realize and make visible the opportunities that we have to support each other effectively, and that's really coming from a basis of knowing what are our individual and organizational intentions and visions, and what are our needs, desires, what are our resources. So yeah, all the mapping that is going on here is really a beginning stage, and at the same time, what we do foresee is the possibility of integrating and downloading existing databases from the different networks that are focusing on solutions and collaboration, so that we can all just bring it together into one beautifully visible possibility of sharing and mutual support and co-creation. This is really where we're moving to.
It reminds me of you know, this big paradigm shift that happened when we humans were able to see the Earth from the outside for the first time. Like when your images there were seeing the planet. For us living today, most of us, it's normal. But we went through a huge cultural shift around that. And I think there's a lot of our systems that are invisible, whether they were purposefully so or not, but around like economics and things like that, where there's aspects of the system that are invested in us really not knowing. And I remember when I first saw Paul Hawken with his Blessed Unrest, where the names of the groups scroll across the screen like in Star Wars, and it speeds up, and he says, well, you know, we'll be here for the next, you know, 3 or 4 days looking at these groups. And I think that there's a lot about seeing and the whole, and these mapping tools are quite critical in terms of feedback loops in our ecology, because we all carry some kind of mind's eye perception, but bringing them more visible, I think, increases the edge, which is something we talk about in permaculture, where a lot more can happen now, a lot of richness can happen. Even you say this woman's doing this, it's like I want to see it now. I want to know what's going on in her head and how she is hearing and transferring it and transcribing it. And I think that this is one of the things that I'm interested in, is this meta-level way of seeing systems, whole systems design, sustainable systems design, regenerative systems design. I mean, we're inherently systems dwellers, but we've not really been supported mostly in systems except exploited systems and things like that, the economic system, where we have all these incentives and disincentives to essentially be disconnected assholes and to rape the planet. And if we want to rewire that, excuse me, but not really, if we want to rewire that, then we need to develop systems literacy, because most of how we understand is not in systems, and it's not in healthy, productive, abundant, and regenerative systems. It's systems that are about exploitation and ending in death and pollution. And this is where I want to lift up this, the meme that I brought up earlier, which is the impulse of life. That's there. And you'll look probably in your health talks and other things that how do we nurture? I look at you, Jan, and I know even though you've probably been working ridiculously hard over the past several weeks, you have such a strong life impulse, right? And that's one of your qualities and characteristics. And it brings such beauty and good energy to so many things. And if we put you in that center of that element analysis of permaculture, looked at your needs, yields, behaviors, and characteristics, your bright shininess would be one of your behaviors or characteristics, right? And if we weave a system around that, which is more or less what you're doing, right, there's a lot of possibility that can come. But every one of the members of your system is needing and deserving some measure of presencing so that they can be seen, they can be met, they can be met on a journey of healing. And whether that someday looks like working hard, and another day looks like setting up a water system, and another day is on the floor giving a, having a group yoga session or whatever, that would be the meta level of your design needs and wants, right? Is how do we create a co-created collective space for health and healing, and for the impulse of life to thrive. And that includes human intelligence. We're very intelligent, but it's not necessarily either directed in good directions or activated. There's been a lot of ways in which our systems want to dumb us down. They don't want us to be awake and alive. And permaculture is a great frame for people to get a second education in, or a real education. And I think that that's where the hunger is a lot of times, is people are hungry for ecological literacy. And I think the transition now is, how do we apply literacy of healthy systems to human systems? And I find that when I present that and offer exercises at conferences and workshops, people are just starved for that. They're just, take it up like an animal at a salt lick, just going, they really want to get into it. So maybe this is one of the things that we can do together. And I'm not just being hand-waving about coming to Rotterdam. If you want to do that, let's plan and design for it.
Yay. Oh, man. Yeah, I feel really excited about that. Really excited. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to make it happen. I was just, when you were talking about the, yeah, here I've got it. Bill Mollison quotes, a quote from Bill here. The tragic reality is that very few sustainable systems are designed or applied by those who hold power. And the reason for this is obvious and simple. To let people arrange their own food, energy, and shelter is to lose power and political control over them. We should cease to look to power structures, hierarchical systems, or governments to help us and devise ways to help ourselves. So that's from the designer manual. I think I got that one a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also very much, you know, where I think we're coming to is this recognition for a need for a fundamental system change, and that system change can really only, you know, because it's so ubiquitous and so entrenched solidified in human consciousness, in the majority of human consciousness as being something that is essentially immutable. This is really where the blessed unrest, you know, can activate itself and start a global citizens movement of conscious positive evolution that is rooted in systemic and cultural transformation. And that's where the whole systems picture comes in, right? Because we can't look at, you know, even thinking of the, you know, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were set out by the UN at the Solution Summit. United Earth, we actually submitted an application to that summit based on the fact that they are looking at these goals as separate is an inherent flaw. You know, aside from the fact that they already know the solutions within the United Nations family, with, you know, GEN, the Global Eco-Village Network, actually having a seat there. They are connected to pretty much all of the solutions on the planet right now. So yeah, I mean, what would you speak? How would you speak to this, you know, need for a systemic shift and how to create that?
Oh, sorry, I had to come back to the other room because I needed to get plugged in. I think most of what comes to mind for me is that we have a way of seeing the world, and pretty much all of our systems are set up on a mechanistic worldview. And I think that one of the highest leverages, if not the highest leverage, is to come from much more of an ecological frame of reference, so that we were to design more of our systems like nature works. And then right off the bat, we'd see that, well, you're going to have problems because a lot of the systems that we're invested in fundamentally kill off the resource base that they depend on. And that's the feedback loop really that we've needed to be in for a long time. But we haven't, I guess, in our narrowness and selfishness, where there was also, when we lived on the planet at a time where there was much more away and more than there obviously ever was, and is more apparent now that it doesn't really exist. I think that we're going to probably go through harder times than we're in now, and potentially really challenging times. And I'm not somebody who's focused on doom and gloom. I just kind of get on with it. But I think that before a system shifts, there's often a lot of resistance and attachment to the way things are. And just even good people here in Toronto, even if they mean well, you know, it's the middle of the winter and the electricity system goes down, people aren't going to last a really long time. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of fragility and brittleness. In nature, we talk about this positive redundancy, which means that you can satisfy a need through more than one means, so that you can have this flexibility to shift from one system to the next, like from wind energy to water generated energy. And the system then has a resilience. And ultimately what we're working towards is to have all of our needs met in stable ways, so that there's a webwork of relationships. But unfortunately, just even the word stable, we think of something like concrete, you know, cement, and that's what we know and understand as stability. But really in nature, it's about a webwork of relationships that are in interconnected pathways where overall there's stability, but it's a dynamic stability. And this is something that we've always been even afraid of. I'll go as far as that, like you were implying with some of your previous comments about wanting to keep people disempowered. And when you were talking about Bill's quote there, I was remembering when we were at the International Permaculture Convergence in London in September, one of the evening's presentations was beautifully done, called 3 Acres and a Cow, which is essentially, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it relates to the fact that historically every person was, and indeed I think still is, entitled to 3 acres and a cow. But we've lost touch with that. And I guess ostensibly the meme is that with that you should be able to provide for all of your needs. And I don't know if we're ever going to go back to this kind of more peasant level agrarianism, and people are terrified of that. But I think that definitely aspects of our system can provide for our food needs with appropriate redundancy of now we've been inviting agricultural production into the fabric of the city, which even, 10 years ago, when we started doing that 20 years ago, we were just like outlaw freaks, right? People just thought we were insane. Now, of course, it's heralded by the city as, all the wonderful things that are done, and we have professional level rooftop garden associations and things like that. And that's part of the succession. This is what we do. We have a few stalwart individuals who are the pioneer species, and they go in and garden and help to make things happen in areas where it's not necessarily very, very hospitable or supportive, because they have the qualities and characteristics to find resources and to develop ecologies to help get this system started. And then as the energy and resources start to flow and organic matter starts to accumulate and more can be fed, it creates space for other people to come in who are not as crusty pioneers, but they can have space, and then the system grows and flourishes over time. So see right there, that's applying traditional ecological ways of seeing and thinking and understanding change and growth over time. And again, applying it to a human system and a human ecology. And sure, there's still biophysical elements like soil or buildings or whatever, but it's a way of seeing that a person goes then, oh, right, that's what's happening. And there's something that happens in our bodies as well as our brains where the energy drops and settles down. And there's also an up and excited impulse, especially for the activated extroverts, but there's a lot more that becomes possible. And it's like, oh, okay, right, so then who are our pioneers? Oh, are we pioneers? What are we pioneering? What is the ecologies that we are pioneering or stewarding? What are the pieces that we're trying to lift up? How are we gardening? What is our soil? What are the nutrients in our soil? And as you probably know, one of the strongest indicators of ecosystem health is your mycelial network in the soil. Because we often are focused on what's above the soil and what's visible. And part of the paradigm shift, even in conventional science, is starting to look into the whole magical mystery tour of what's happening in soil. And even they are beginning to acknowledge that we don't really know. But again, a strong indicator of health is if your microorganisms and macroorganisms in the soil, but moreover the mycelia, the roots and hyphae of your fungi and things like that, if that's strong, that's the internet of the soil, right? And so part of what you're doing through this event is you're stimulating and feeding that web work of connectivity across and through all these different, what you're calling silos. And you're helping to shift. You're doing groundwork. You're doing foundational soil building work towards making the vision of what you have much more possible. And this is a succession that will happen over time. This is living into it. It's calling it. You've connected with it in your mind's eye and your spirit, and you're calling it in. So all of these are soil. You're gardening right now. You've created a rooftop garden, right? But it's this interweb rooftop garden connected to other rooftop gardens. You're teaching people how to garden, and you're also looking at other master gardeners from around the world and saying, Tell us about midwifery. Tell us about communication. How do these pieces of the truth relate to what we're doing? How do we weave together? And they have needs and wants for you. And I would also, in the future, make it kind of a requirement for all your teachers and leaders to listen to each other, just as a by the by. I mean, it's a bit, because I find that one of the things that happens is we as leaders, we don't spend enough time with each other. And it's one of the highest needs, but we don't really recognize it, is to be met and presenced and to stimulate each other and to share the core of what we're thinking and feeling. And there's the, oh, what am I on about? But then there's like the, what do I really want to do? Maybe that's the question I should have fed you to ask me.
Wow, so beautiful. So beautiful to hear you, Jillian, and yeah, I just want to also presence this this next event that is coming up on April 20th to 23rd, where we are physically gathering the people who are passionate about co-creating this phenomenon, this awakening of the mycelium. So yeah, if you're at all available to come at that time, it would be wonderful to have you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to come at under a normal year. I might have been able to, but I'm pretty committed here. I have much more to do in the North American Northeast than I can possibly deal with. And never mind all the other projects I'm working on. And we just have an eco-village design course coming up at our eco-village out in British Columbia. So that's going to be taking up quite a bit of time. Ah, it looks like you have a beautiful woman with bamboo roofing coming into you. Yes, your camera's on. I outed you. Hello.
Hey, Rob.
Not a woman, but yeah. I'm joining from a booth.
Well, you're very beautiful.
Robert,
Thank you.
Okay, I just thank you, Robert. I'm just before you come in, I just want to thank Jillian once again, especially for this extended exchange that I'm so happy that we got to make, and yeah, just bodes really well for me. You know, to know that you are open and interested to coming here in Rotterdam, and certainly until that time that we're gonna really keep these channels open and yeah, cultivate our garden, the garden between us and the garden around us, and yeah, really happy. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, Jillian.
Well, thank you very much for all you're doing, and also the chance to practice through this medium. And it's a good thing I ran a not-for-profit and had a bag of spare computer parts, or boxes of them, this morning, because I really had to test my skills to make my computer work. So again, a little less grounded than I would have liked, but still very appreciative of the opportunity to practice now. And now that I have my glasses on, I can see you better. Hello, bamboo person. Okay, thank you. I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you,
Jillian.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yay. Yay.